Chapter 3.1, Part 7. We're into Roman art. This is our last segment here on Chapter 3.1. So we know that they absorbed a lot of the traditions. It doesn't say specifically here, but this is all Greek stuff. The gods, the Greek gods, become the Roman gods. The multiple gods, pantheism. The Corinthian order. Also, they use the other Doric and Ionic a little bit as well, but the Corinthian order is mainly the Roman order. And the ideal proportions. So a shift with Roman art is going to get away from athleticism and more toward emperors and civic leaders. Sorry, they conquer a lot of land, unprecedented until this point in history. It's the largest empire ever known, and then it lasts for quite a long time, about 400 years. So it was very impressive how broad and wide their reach was. We know that they were up in areas of Germany and England to the north and Egypt to the south. So very large area, not an empire before that, a singular empire. So the sculpture is going to portray individual characters versus the ideal facial features, meaning we're not just making an idealized looking form, athletic form, showing them youthful and all that. We want it lifelike, and we want it to be actual portraits of actual people. And it's kind of interesting because in some ways, well, in many ways, this is how we know exactly what the Romans looked like, the Roman leaders of that time. So we have here a Roman citizen, and this is a marble piece, life-size, 80 BC, so before the year 0. We're getting closer, though, in that time frame. These two busts that he's holding, so we have a bit of ancestor worship going on here. These two busts that he's holding are his predecessors, his relatives, and what they were likely made from would have been a wax-like material they would put over the dead person's face to capture it, make a mold of it, and then they would do some kind of plaster casting, most likely, and then use that to sculpt the marble. Marble is very difficult and hard and difficult to sculpt, so when you don't have a model, it makes it harder. So a lot of times there's a plaster form or an actual person to model the marble off of, but it takes such a long time if you have to wait around as an important person, an emperor standing there, you get a little bit irritated. So sometimes they'll do a casting of their face, and then they're able to make the portrait. So these are actual portraits, and his is as well, but he's holding these busts, which were important in his history. Okay, he's got the toga, the whole Roman look here. So it reinforces his social status, and they're very realistic, and we do see the aging now. We see the realistic look of the face. So this is a really interesting piece. Now, kind of going back to our overarching theme about prehistoric work and so on, a lot of painting doesn't get preserved because paint pigments fade, materials fade, and walls can crumble down. This is a fresco, but in this case, not like we had the paintings in the caves. The cave is what preserved it, and a lot of times in Egypt, the interior of the tomb and the dry desert climate preserved it. Now this is a different case where these were preserved. In Pompeii, Vesuvius erupts, Mount Vesuvius erupts, a volcano nearby, and it preserves everything in the town. And they didn't find it till, I think, the 1700s, something like that. They were excavating, 18th century, and they found all kinds of stuff. It's really wild. You want to look into Herculaneum and Pompeii. Those are the two cities preserved in this blast from Mount Vesuvius, the volcano. But Mount Vesuvius is still an active volcano now. There's still a lot of active volcano and earthquake activity in Italy and surrounding Mediterranean. But anyway, this color was preserved, this fresco was preserved, and this is called the Villa of the Mysteries. Now there are several of these. This says room number 5. there are different scenes from the same thing of the Dionysic cult. The Dionysus is the the Roman version of the Greek god Bacchus. Bacchus is drinking and merriment and sex, and so this is somewhat of a sex cult. Women are learning about sex, and it's partly a discussion, but there's some other things that go on that are very mysterious to us, hence the mystery freeze. We don't exactly know what they're trying to tell us here, but this is a male figure on this side, and the lyre here, remember that instrument? This is how we know what it looked like. This is about 2,000, 3,000 years later from the one that we found in Mesopotamia, but it looks very, very similar. So he's playing the music. He is disrobed. We're not sure what's happening here, but there's several of these wall paintings, and they're quite large. So it's worship of Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, agriculture, and theater. Now, Dionysus and Bacchus are kind of a little bit of what the devil in Christianity is based on, the look of him. But also some of the elements, like the grape leaves, the god of wine, turn into Christ's symbolism for Christ, because what's happening here, because we're in the year 60, right? And as Christianity is taking hold in certain areas, these artisans that know how to do the grape leaves and so on, they get employed to do Christian mosaics and frescoes, and they use some of the same imagery. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so this city was covered during this eruption in 69 CE, so 19 years, we think, after this painting was made, that it gets preserved.